Indianapolis is a city of contrasts. However, for the Blackburn family, what was meant to be a peaceful haven and a home filled with God's grace turned into a site of violent tragedy. On the morning of November 10, 2015, a car was parked outside a home on Sunnyfield Court. Davey Blackburn had just returned from his daily workout at the gym. He was about to get out of the car when a phone call delayed him for a few minutes. After finishing the call, he got out of the car and went into the house. As he opened the door, he froze and his gym bag fell from his hands. His wife lay on the living room floor in a pool of blood. Davey, confused and in shock, rushed to his wife's side, checked for a pulse, and urgently dialed emergency services. The young woman was still alive. The living room was in complete disarray, with items scattered everywhere and her purse emptied. From the second floor, the cries of a small child could be heard. Emergency services arrived at the house within 8 minutes, cordoned off the area, and filled the house with police officers and investigators. The victim, 28-year-old Amanda Blackburn, was rushed to the hospital. But let's go back to the beginning to ensure we don't miss any important details of this tragic story. Amanda Grace Buers was born on July 31, 1987, in Muskegon, Michigan. She attended school in Indianapolis, Indiana, until her family moved to Elkhart in 1995. Amanda graduated from Elkhart Christian Academy in 2006, and by 2008, she earned an associate's degree from Pensacola Christian College in Pensacola, Florida. Amanda grew up in a deeply religious family where Christianity and the power of God's Word were paramount. Her father was the lead pastor of First Baptist Church in Elkhart, Indiana. From a young age, Amanda knew church sermons and psalms by heart and honored them unconditionally. While other children were eager to grow up, attend parties, and experience romantic love, Amanda's heart was devoted to Jesus, and she dreamed of serving Him. God loved Amanda deeply, for He had created her in the likeness of an angel, a blonde-haired, slender girl with an open, kind smile and sincere intentions. Her beauty was matched by her pure thoughts and heart, always filled with love for her neighbor. As a teenager, Amanda took a vow of chastity, pledging not to kiss a man until she was married, and she remained true to her word. Her heart fluttered when she met her true love, Davey Blackburn, a native of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, who studied religion at Southern Wesleyan University and came from a Christian family. Davey and Amanda met on a blind date at a Hawk Nelson Christian band concert organized by her sister and Davey's best friend. Although they attended different colleges, they spent every vacation together, cherishing a pure, platonic love free from earthly lusts. They enjoyed walks, shared their innermost thoughts, and delighted in excerpts from church books. Before returning to school once, Davey and Amanda had a playful milkshake drinking contest, which Amanda lost. Davey jokingly called her a milk girl, and looking at her, he realized she was the one he wanted to marry. Despite their long-distance relationship, they remained close through constant messages, calls, and cherished every vacation together. Their respect for the sanctity of their relationship led them to visit a psychologist to learn how to communicate effectively. On August 1, 2008, Amanda and Davey Blackburn were married. After the wedding, Davey told friends that their first kiss confirmed a special bond ordained by God. For the first 4 years of their marriage, the Blackburns lived in South Carolina, where Davey served as an associate pastor at New Spring Church under Pastor Perry Nogle. However, Davey desired more and proposed moving to Indianapolis to start a new church for youth. Initially reluctant to leave her family, Amanda eventually agreed, believing that God had significant plans for them. In 2012, the Blackburns moved to Indianapolis to plant an independent, high-profile church on the north side. Their religious organization focused on young people, featuring weekly videos on their website about relationship advice, conflict resolution, and biblical perspectives on intimate relationships. In 2014, the family welcomed their firstborn child, Weston Blackburn. They enjoyed a happy life in a comfortable home on a quiet street with a fulfilling job at their church, which attracted many young followers. However, the Blackburns' perfect harmony was shattered on November 10, 2015. Ambulance crews arrived at their residence in the 2800 block of Sunnyfield Court around 8 a.m. Amanda, who was pregnant, was rushed to the hospital and placed on a ventilator, undergoing resuscitative measures. Tragically, Amanda passed away the next day, along with her unborn baby girl, who was named Evie Grace. Her death prompted an outpouring of sympathy and prayers on social media for an extended period. As friends, family members, and strangers mourned Amanda with public posts, on November 11th, the day she was officially declared dead, Davey released an official statement. He said that Amanda had made it her life's calling to love and serve everyone she knew, and her mission was to know Jesus as her personal savior and to share him with multitudes. He believed that through her death and legacy, more people would come to a saving faith in Christ. Davey expressed certainty that Amanda wanted him to continue the work they had started in Indy, affirming his belief that God would turn their tragedy into triumph and that the best was yet to come. The murder of the pregnant woman was a devastating blow not only to her Orthodox family, but also a shock to the entire state. People demanded justice for Amanda and her unborn child, insisting that the perpetrator be found and punished. In his first interview after the incident, Davey Blackburn recounted finding Amanda injured and unconscious on the living room floor. She was partially naked, with her underwear lying nearby, and was lying in a pool of blood, face down. Davey told investigators that he had left the house around 6 a.m. to go to the fitness center, leaving the door unlocked as he usually did. It's unclear if locking the door would have deterred the criminals, but it would have made it harder for them to enter the house so easily, possibly giving Amanda time to contact emergency services. The attack left Amanda with 3 gunshot wounds, one of which was to the head. No arrests were made in the days immediately following the crime, but police quickly determined that Davey Blackburn was not involved. During the trial, Davey Blackburn's testimony was supplemented by that of Scott Floyd, the first emergency medical paramedic from the Indianapolis Fire Department who arrived at the home after Davey's 911 call. Scott testified that Davey was outside at the end of the driveway with bloody hands when they arrived and appeared very calm. Davey reportedly did not understand what had happened to Amanda, claiming she was lying on the floor and he could not wake her up. He stated that he had come home from the gym around 7:30 a.m. and continued his phone call with his friend Kenneth Wagner in the driveway, occasionally peeking through the front door window to check on baby Weston. He said he finished his call, entered the house at 8:10 a.m. and found Amanda lying face down on the floor. He thought she was sick or unconscious and called emergency services at 8:22 a.m., taking 12 minutes to make the call. In an emergency, 12 minutes is a long time. Davey repeatedly said he thought something had gone wrong with the pregnancy and that Amanda might have gotten dizzy and fallen. However, questions arose about why he did not notice the brain matter about 5 feet away from her body. Emergency room Dr. Scott Floyd testified that the blood on Amanda's head was coagulated, leading him to believe that the gunshot wound had occurred a couple of hours earlier. However, these details were not made public in the trial transcripts. Davey was asked if he had called anyone else after calling 911. He said he had called his father. Defense attorneys did not cross-examine Davey Blackburn, and authorities corroborated his story with surveillance footage from the gym, clearing him as a suspect. An autopsy conducted on November 12th revealed that Amanda had suffered a gunshot wound to the back of her head, a gunshot wound to her lower left arm that penetrated her biceps, and a through-and-through gunshot wound to her upper back. Additionally, she had multiple scratches on her left cheek, a split lip, and a knocked-out lower tooth, indicating a possible struggle with her attacker. A thorough investigation was launched, including examining CCTV footage from nearby streets and interviewing neighbors and acquaintances. A neighbor reported hearing gunshots about 35 minutes after Davey left the house. Another neighbor, Reginald Townsell, expressed shock, stating that their street was not the type of neighborhood where such a shooting could occur, and that the Blackburns didn't deserve this tragedy. The neighbors regarded the Blackburn family as wonderful and truly loving people. Based on Amanda's injuries and the missing bank cards and MacBook bag, the initial theory was robbery. Police determined that on the morning of November 10, 2015, several emergency calls reported home invasions at nearby homes. Around 5:20 a.m., one woman reported waking up to find her cell phone, laptop, purse and keys missing, along with her car from the parking lot. The sliding glass door to her apartment was open. 3 hours later, another woman reported a burglary at a home on Sunnyfield Court where 4 televisions, a MacBook Pro, a Tiffany pearl necklace, a pink women's sweater, a remote control, a bag of oranges, and bedding were missing. 5 minutes after that, Davey Blackburn made his emergency call. Lieutenant Richard Riddle of the Indianapolis Police Department stated that police were investigating a connection between Amanda's homicide and other burglaries in the same neighborhood that morning. While police kept many details of the investigation confidential, they released images of possible suspects from one of the burglarized homes, asking the public for assistance in identifying them. Davey Blackburn expressed confidence that the police were doing everything possible to catch his wife's perpetrator. Investigators assured that they had significant resources and leads, giving them confidence that they would soon identify and apprehend those responsible. The key clues used to track down the 3 suspects were a stolen pink sweater, cell phone records, and an ATM receipt. The receipt and sweater were found in a stolen Chrysler Sebring used during the robberies. Authorities recovered the vehicle, which provided further leads in the investigation. On November 11th, near the Blackburns' home, the debit card listed on the ATM receipt matched Amanda Blackburn's stolen card. Investigators obtained a warrant to examine the ATM camera, which showed the driver covering his face with a stolen pink sweater. DNA testing, surveillance footage, and witness testimonies were crucial in identifying the suspects. DNA testing from the sweater confirmed that Jaylen Watson was one of the suspects, marking the first major breakthrough in the case. Cell phone records played a significant role in the investigation. Watson's number was already in the database due to his parole for another burglary, and Diana Gordon's cell phone records were also obtained. These records indicated that Watson's and Gordon's phones were in the area during the crime and near the Chase Bank where Amanda's debit card was used. Larry Taylor was identified through further examination of surveillance footage and tracking his phone number and address. Reports surfaced that a gun had been found near the Blackburn home, delivered to the Broad Ripple Fire Department by a man who claimed to have found it outside the couple's home. The gun was analyzed by crime lab technicians and after 2 weeks of investigation was confirmed to be the murder weapon. Police charged 18-year-old Larry Taylor and 21-year-old Jaylen Watson with Amanda Blackburn's murder. A third suspect, 24-year-old Diana Gordon, was arrested for a parole violation, but was not charged with a felony as he did not enter the Blackburn home. When questioned, Larry Taylor admitted to shooting Amanda twice, claiming she jumped on him and he didn't want her to scratch him. He then leaned over her body, shot her in the back of the head, and watched her bleed to death. The criminal trio had initially come to rob the Blackburn house, believing it to be an easy target as the front door was left unlocked when Davey went to the gym. Inside, they confronted Amanda. To keep her out of the way, Taylor hit her with a gun. Watson and Gordon, seeing the situation, decided to leave with the bank cards they had stolen earlier. They attempted to withdraw $500 from one ATM unsuccessfully, but managed to get $1,400 from another, where they were caught on CCTV. They then drove back to the Blackburn house to pick up Taylor. During their absence, Amanda regained consciousness and lunged at Taylor, leading to a struggle. Taylor tackled her and afterwards put the stolen debit cards in the car of an accomplice who had gone to an ATM. Upon returning, Taylor admitted to shooting Amanda. Court documents revealed that the Blackburn home was the third target of the November 10th crime spree by Taylor, Watson, and Gordon. In the first break-in, they stole a laptop, wallet, and car while the resident was asleep inside the home. They discovered they were being recorded by a video camera but simply moved on. The group drove to another home, broke in through a patio window, and stole 4 televisions, a laptop, jewelry, a bag of oranges, and a pink sweater, which eventually helped police identify them. Court documents outlined the evidence police collected against the suspects. The most crucial piece of evidence was Watson's DNA on the pink sweater taken during the second burglary, which was then used to cover his face from a surveillance camera as he tried to withdraw cash using Amanda Blackburn's bank card. Watson and Gordon cooperated with the investigation in return for reduced sentences. Larry Taylor waived his right to remain silent and admitted to being near the scene of the burglary, though he claimed to be so confused that he couldn't remember clearly. Formal charges were filed by the county prosecutor. Larry Taylor faced 13 charges, including felony murder for knowingly and willfully killing Amanda Blackburn, Jalen Watson was charged with a felony, and both he and Taylor faced multiple charges of burglary, robbery, and theft. Diana Gordon, already in custody due to a parole violation, also faced burglary charges. A fourth person, who knew about the crimes but did not participate, was questioned and released. The Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department's Violent Crimes Unit worked with the gang unit and federal marshals to arrest Taylor. Police Chief Rick Hite praised the cooperation that led to the arrest, noting that detectives worked tirelessly without sleep to solve the murder. Assistant U.S. Attorney Josh Minkler and Prosecutor Terry Curry were instrumental in bringing justice. Given that Amanda was pregnant, prosecutors considered additional charges related to the fetus. Although Amanda's underwear was removed and her shirt was pulled up, there was no evidence to support rape charges. Larry Taylor's first trial in December 2021 was declared a mistrial when it was discovered that a juror had shared information about the case with other jurors. The final trial took place in October 2022 with more thorough jury selection. Over 100 potential jurors were called, each filling out a 16-page questionnaire to ensure a fair verdict. Larry Joe Taylor was sentenced to 86 years in the Indiana State Correctional Institution for the murder of Amanda Blackburn, and additional charges related to burglary. Diana Gordon and Jalen Watson agreed to plea deals and testified against Taylor. They received sentences ranging from 20 to 35 years in prison. Both Jalen Watson and Larry Taylor are currently incarcerated in the Marion County Jail. In Indiana, a murder conviction can result in 45 to 60 years in prison, with some cases punishable by life imprisonment or the death penalty. Prosecutors filed a motion to enhance Taylor's sentence, which could add an additional 20 years to his prison term. Because Amanda Blackburn was pregnant when she was brutally murdered, the case drew widespread attention and sympathy. Davey Blackburn, the church's pastor, expressed relief that those responsible for his wife's death had been caught and would no longer pose a threat. Amanda's death resonated with thousands, including the state's chief executive. Her funeral, held at a Christian church, was attended by more than 2,000 people, including Governor Mike Pence. The Resonate Church set up a donation page to help cover Amanda Blackburn's funeral and medical expenses. Davey Blackburn expressed hope in the judicial system, believing it would wisely address the pain caused by the perpetrators. Remarkably, he reported that he had chosen to forgive Amanda's killers. "I was very relieved to learn of the arrest," he told reporters. "Although everything inside me wants to hate, be angry, and despair, I choose the path of forgiveness, grace, and hope." Amanda Blackburn's case generated significant national and international media interest. Davey Blackburn transitioned from an anguished husband to a popular blogger, capitalizing on his tragedy by recording multiple podcasts and videos under the title Nothing Wasted. He began appearing on TV stations, discussing his wife's death, recounting the pain he had experienced, and retelling the tragic story. Despite the sorrowful context, he did not appear unhappy. Amanda's death brought Davey both fame and financial gain. He received an insurance payout after her death, raising suspicions about whether he might have intentionally left the door unlocked on November 10, 2015. What do you think? On March 2, 2016, Davey Blackburn purchased a new 5-bedroom, 4-bath home with a pool. He sold the house where Amanda was murdered. For someone who had lost his beloved wife, Davey appeared quite content. In July 2016, he posted a photo of his new home on his blog with the caption, "How happy I am to have pool parties in my new home." Davey Blackburn has since found happiness in a new marriage. Nothing is wasted. Serendipity. Turn your eyes to Jesus, gaze upon his marvelous countenance, and earthly things become strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. These days, ugly divorces are all too common. Thankfully, even the most contentious separations rarely end in violence. However, in mid-February 2022, a Florida couple's bitter divorce made front-page news when Jared Bryan, a young husband and father, was gunned down after dropping off his children at his ex-wife Shanna's home in Northeast Florida. The circumstances surrounding the murder were suspicious from the start. Shanna was a person of interest from the very beginning,
though she always maintained her innocence.
We're gonna bring you inside real quick. Get you out of the
to do with the crime.
car, right?
However, between January and August 2023, she Her new husband and an acquaintance
were arrested and charged with various crimes, including Jared's murder. It is important to note that neither Shanna nor her co-defendants have been convicted of any crime at this time, and they are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Before we delve into the details, we would like to extend our deepest sympathies to the family and friends of Jared Bryan and all who loved and miss him. Jared Bryan and Shanna Lee Gardner both came from Mormon families. Shanna grew up in Utah, where her parents were successful and wealthy entrepreneurs. Jared was born in rural Missouri, but his family moved to Florida when he was young. More than 2 decades later, he met Shanna while visiting a friend in Florida. Jared was a confident and likable young man with a good head on his shoulders, and Shanna was a beautiful young woman with a magnetic personality. At that point, both were devout members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It seemed like a match made in heaven. After a whirlwind romance, a whirlwind courtship that lasted less than a year, the smitten couple officially tied the knot in Salt Lake City in 2010. They initially lived in Orem, Utah, where Jared was a full-time student at Utah Valley University. For nearly 4 years, Shanna's wealthy parents were their primary means of financial support, providing approximately $8,000 each month to cover tuition, rent, food, and utilities. With Jared not working, he focused nearly all his energy on his studies. Shanna's parents hoped that their financial support would pay off once Jared earned his bachelor's degree in digital media and secured a good job. However, this support was a constant source of tension between Shanna, her parents, and Jared. According to some sources, Shanna's parents believed Jared took the money for granted and felt entitled to it. Despite these issues, Jared graduated in 2014, and he and Shanna moved to Connecticut shortly afterward. This was the first time they were truly on their own, but the transition was rocky. Before long, Jared began hearing rumors that his wife was having an affair with her personal trainer. Shanna denied the allegations, but despite the growing friction, they eventually became the proud parents of twins, a boy and a girl. Later, they moved over 1,000 miles, 1,900 kilometers south to sunny Florida because their son had a heart condition that required him to breathe relatively warm air at or near sea level. By early 2015, Shanna was spending less time at home and more time at the gym and a local tattoo and piercing business, where she made new friends and got some body piercings. As a traditional Mormon, Jared did not approve of his wife's new friends or her lifestyle. The truth was that they no longer shared the same values. Friends, family members, and co-workers noticed they had grown apart, and some even detected palpable animosity between them. Shanna eventually became so fed up that she allegedly asked one tattoo artist if they knew anyone who could shut Jared up. It is unclear if she made this statement in jest or if she genuinely wanted him hurt or even killed. Whatever the case, Shanna filed for divorce in February 2015. Jared wasn't altogether surprised, but he wasn't happy that Shanna wanted primary custody of their 2 children. Jared was determined to fight this demand, leading to a long and contentious legal battle. In 2015, Jared and Shanna divorced. Court records obtained from the St. Johns County court system reveal a complicated process lasting over 5 years. During the proceedings, both Shanna and Jared leveled numerous unsavory accusations against each other, which is common in contentious custody battles. While the veracity of these claims remains uncertain, the court ultimately ruled that both were fit parents and should share custody. They agreed to exchange the twins at regular intervals, and initially the arrangement worked. After the divorce, Shanna embraced her newfound independence. She continued to spend as much time as possible with her children. As much as she could, Shanna also founded a successful baking company and found a new love interest in Mario Fernandez Solana. When they met in 2018, he was a maintenance man at the gym near Jacksonville Beach where she regularly worked out. They got married the following year. Shanna's new husband added another layer of stress to an already tense situation, but by then, Jared had remarried as well. He described his new wife, Kirsten, as his best friend and eternal companion. Jared and Kirsten eventually had 2 children of their own. Early in their marriage, things were going so well that Jared took time out of his busy schedule to make Facebook posts, where he laid out the 3 cornerstones of his existence. The first was his faith, the second was his wife Kirsten, and the third were his 4 children, who meant the world to him. By 2022, Jared was 33 years old and a senior Microsoft design manager with a loving family and a bright future. His unpleasant divorce from Shanna was little more than a speck in the rearview mirror. As far as he knew, she was happy with her new life, as he was with his. Jared, Kristen, and their 2 children lived in St. Augustine, Florida, and his twins from his first marriage with Shana regularly visited. On the evening of Wednesday, February 16, 2022, Jared loaded his 2-year-old daughter Bexley from his second marriage and his 9-year-old twins from the first marriage into his Volkswagen Atlas and drove to Shanna's house in Jacksonville Beach, about 40 miles, 64 kilometers away. This was a weekly routine since Jared and Shanna had joint custody of the children. The first leg of the trip was uneventful, and about an hour later, he dropped off the children at their mother's home and began heading back towards St. Augustine with his daughter, still strapped in the booster seat in the back. Jared noticed a spare tire and rim in the road directly in front of him as they passed an exclusive gated community called The Sanctuary, just a few miles from Shanna's home. He could have easily driven around it and let someone else deal with it. That's probably what many would have done. But Jared had a solid work ethic and a clear sense of right and wrong. The tire was obviously a safety hazard, and he knew it could even cause an accident if he didn't get it out of the travel lane. Unsurprisingly, he brought the car to a stop, flipped on the emergency flashers, got out, and walked over to roll the tire onto the shoulder. What happened next isn't entirely clear, but apparently as he bent down to grab the tire, a gunman or gunmen emerged from the darkness and shot him multiple times at close range. The deafening cracks ripped through the otherwise quiet night, and just a fraction of a second later, Jared fell to the ground with a sickening thud. Sadly, no one witnessed the crime, and whoever committed the heinous act disappeared into the darkness. Kirsten became anxious when numerous calls to Jared's phone went unanswered. Later that evening, shortly after the shooting, a bystander drove by the horrific scene and called 911. When first responders arrived, the tire and Jared's lifeless body was still in the middle of the road. Jared wasn't armed, and there were no signs of a struggle or a fight. Thankfully, they found 2-year-old Bexley crying but unharmed in the car. Jared's daughter was still strapped in her car seat behind him, and though unharmed, was dangerously close to the gunfire. According to the initial Jacksonville Beach Police Department report, officers were told that she was worried about her dad, but did not see what happened. Later, Jacksonville Beach investigators arrived and meticulously examined every inch of the crime scene. They knew that jumping to premature conclusions was unwise, but they didn't think they were dealing with a random crime or even a crime of opportunity. After all, whoever gunned Jared down did not take his child, his vehicle, his wallet, his wedding ring, or anything of value from inside the car. Based on the odd nature of the crime scene, they concluded that someone had intentionally placed the tire in the road, suggesting a staged ambush. If the tire had randomly fallen out of the back of a passing pickup truck, there was almost no chance a good Samaritan who stopped to move it would have been killed. They didn't know whether Jared was the intended target or if he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, but they were confident that the true nature of the crime would come to light as the investigation progressed. Jared's wife Kirsten was shocked, devastated, and utterly bewildered when she found out that her beloved husband had been gunned down in cold blood. When Jared's ex-wife Shanna heard the news, she told the Florida Times-Union that she couldn't imagine what his family was going through, and that under the circumstances, the best thing she could do was to give them their space. But as the murder made headlines across Florida and the rest of the country, Shanna and Jared Bryan's ugly divorce would be dragged into the light. As the weeks passed, the unthinkable tragedy remained fresh in the hearts and minds of Jared's friends and loved ones. Kind words, prayers, and emotional support poured in from all over the world. However, closer to home, Shanna did not attend the private memorial service held in Jared's honor. According to her mother, Shanna wasn't invited. In a blog post, Shanna's mother stated, "I asked Shanna about the situation. She told me his family did not invite me or want me there." By then, A few pieces of the puzzle had fallen into place, but security footage from several homes and businesses near the crime scene threatened to blow the case wide open. Some grainy images showed a dark, 2004 to 2008 Ford F-150 pickup truck with running boards and a toolbox in the back, seen in the area at the time of the murder. Unfortunately, neither the license plate nor any other distinguishing marks were visible. Worse yet, Florida is full of dark 2000-something F-150 pickup trucks matching the one in the photo. Investigators knew they had their work cut out for them, but eventually they would find out who the truck was registered to. It is unclear if the information came as a direct result of the $55,000 reward that had been offered, but officers made an unannounced visit to the truck owner's residence shortly thereafter. Neither the pickup truck nor its owner was there, but they found a tire leaning against the side of the house that bore a striking resemblance to the one in the road the night Jared was murdered. Officers took the tire as evidence back to the station. They found it was the same size, had the same tread pattern, and was manufactured on the same date as the one taken from the crime scene. In other words, the two tires were nearly identical. This suggested they had probably been purchased together and used on the same vehicle at one time or another. Shanna and her family did their best to stay out of the public eye as investigators continued to work the case. She also hired a PR firm and a prominent Florida defense attorney, Henry Hank Cox, because she was tired of being hounded by journalists and having images of her and her family used without her consent. She said that the tense and often unfair media coverage made her children feel unsafe and that some media outlets had even implied she had something to do with Jared's murder. Shanna just wanted everyone to respect her privacy and leave her family alone. However, in early July 2022, she granted an exclusive interview to WJAX TV Action News Jack's anchorwoman Kristen Ra. During the interview, Shanna said she had remained silent for so long because Jared's widow, Kirsten, had asked her to, but she felt it was finally time to speak out due to the intense scrutiny and rampant speculation around the case. As her innocence has come into question, Shanna Gardner spoke to me in the only TV interview
she says she'll be doing to tell her side of the story.
We're going to bring you inside real quick.
I do want people to understand where I'm coming from, Shanna said. Almost 5 months after Jared Bryan was murdered in the street in front of
his 2-year-old daughter, we spoke with his ex-wife, who had not commented publicly so far. Our first question, why have you stayed silent? I was asked to not talk to the media or give a public statement, but with the level of speculation, I felt that now it was necessary to speak out, Shanna Gardner revealed. She was asked by Jared Bryan's widow, Kirsten, not to speak publicly. Shortly into the interview, viewers across the country watched intently as Kristen Ra finally asked the question everyone had been waiting for. Did you have anything to do with Jared's murder? No, I did not have anything to do with his murder, Shanna replied. Unsurprisingly, Shanna denied any knowledge or involvement in Jared's murder, as she had done from the very beginning. Then, she and the twins moved to Washington State without Mario in mid-March 2023, shortly after she dropped his last name for her maiden name, Caitlin. Do you have any sense as to why she moved without her husband? We don't at this point, but the timing of that, as you say, we do not believe in coincidences. The timing of that is really striking. Nobody knew for sure why Mario did not join them, but it appeared as though Shanna's second marriage was on the rocks. This could have serious repercussions at the trial if Shanna and Mario turned on one another, but only time would tell. On January 25, 2023, nearly a year after Jared's murder, Florida State Prosecutor Melissa Nelson and Jacksonville Beach Police Chief Gene Paul Smith made a remarkable announcement. Earlier that day, a 61-year-old man named Henry Arthur Tenon had been arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder and second-degree murder with a weapon, an accessory to a capital felony after the fact and child abuse. Police Chief Smith also stated that Jared was the target of an ambush and that the tire was intentionally placed along the route he traveled from his ex-wife's home. Prosecutor Nelson mentioned that the case was still active, but at that point, she declined to say if she thought Shanna had anything to do with the murder. Tenon originally pleaded not guilty, but 2 months later, he changed his plea to guilty as the case against him strengthened. Arrest records showed that Tenen was a convicted felon with numerous weapons charges, and he had previously rented a home from Shana's second husband, Mario Fernandez Solana. Additionally, the arrest warrant stated that he had received 3 checks from Mario in October of 2022, just months before Jared was murdered. Phone records indicated the two men had communicated nearly 36 times in February 2023. After Tenen's arraignment in the Duval County Courthouse, Kirsten Bryan made a poignant public plea, asking him to do the right thing by telling investigators and prosecutors everything he knew about the murder. Tenen was the first person to be arrested and charged in connection with Jared's murder, but he was not the last. Nearly 2 months later, on March 16, 2023, 35-year-old Mario Fernandez Solana was also arrested in Orange County, Florida. He was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, solicitation to commit a capital felony, and child abuse. He pleaded not guilty to all the charges. Ironically, he was arrested on the same day that State Attorney Melissa Nelson announced that Henry Arthur Tenen had pled guilty to second-degree murder and admitted to being the trigger man. In return for his plea, the state agreed to waive sentencing guidelines and drop the charges of conspiracy to commit murder, accessory to a capital felony after the fact, and child abuse, all of which were punishable by up to 30 years in prison. This meant that, at the end of the trial, his prison sentence would be decades shorter than it would have been otherwise. However, the deal was contingent upon him testifying truthfully against his co-defendants. Then, on August 17, 2023, gun-wielding ATF agents unexpectedly showed up at Shanna's home in West Richland, Washington. At the time, she was inside with her children. Thankfully, she surrendered voluntarily and cooperated with the agents, but the episode must have been unimaginably stressful for her and her children. Before agents whisked Shanna away, she told a neighbor who had come to witness the arrest that she now had custody of the children. Since Shanna was arrested in a different state from where the murder was committed, she would be held on a fugitive warrant until extradition could be arranged. A Washington judge informed her that she had the right to demand that the state of Florida secure a governor's warrant before she was extradited to Duval County. The following is a transcript of the court proceedings. Good afternoon, everyone. I believe we are here on the matter of Shanna Gardner, is that correct? That's correct, Your Honor. Andrew Wagley on behalf of the defendant. I just put in a notice of appearance, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Wagley. Good afternoon. I do have an advisement that I need to go over with your client before we get started. You are being held on a fugitive warrant because it is alleged by complaint that you have committed a felony in the demanding state. A copy of the complaint outlining the charges should be provided to you. You have the right to require that the demanding state secure a governor's warrant for your return to the demanding state. In the event the demanding state does secure a governor's warrant, the governor of Washington will then issue a formal order authorizing your extradition back to the demanding state. You have the right to seek a writ of habeas corpus, challenging the constitutionality of your detention. However, this was just a legal formality, and Shanna was ultimately extradited to Florida in October 2023. According to Prosecutor Nelson, the state plans to try Shanna and Mario Fernandez Solana together and will seek the death penalty for each defendant. That's right, Anthony. The state intends to try Shanna Gardner and Mario Fernandez together for the murder of Jared Bryan, but already the two defendants appear drastically different in court. Neither the indictment nor the affidavit filed by Jacksonville Beach Detective C.L. Johns revealed the alleged motive behind the crime. However, shortly after the heavily redacted affidavit was made public, Prosecutor Nelson reiterated that Henry Arthur Tenen was the gunman and that Shanna Gardner and Mario Fernandez Solana helped to plan and coordinate the murder. After the arrest, Kirsten Bryan and Jared's brother Adam gave an interview to local television station News 4 Jax. Kirsten said she always suspected that the murder was planned, that Jared was the intended target, and that Tenen had not acted alone. Later in the interview, Adam mentioned that he and Jared had several heart-to-heart talks in the months leading up to his brother's death, and on more than one occasion, Jared expressed fear for his life. Unfortunately, Adam did not reveal who Jared said he was afraid of. Shortly after her husband's murder, Kirsten Bryan appeared on the Dr. Phil show. When asked about Shanna Gardner's claims of innocence, she said, "I have never found Shanna to be a truthful person, so I don't put a lot of weight into what she said. She also added that Shana's post-murder emotions seemed disingenuous and manufactured. Was there anything in particular that stuck out to you about her demeanor? Dr. Phil asked. You know her, and I don't. The fact that she seems to me to be trying to be emotional, there's no tears, there's no real emotion there. It doesn't come across as genuine to me, Kirsten replied. While she never explicitly stated whether she believed Shana was involved in Jared's murder, her comments implied that she did. Either way, Kirsten was confident that Jared's killers would be brought to justice sooner or later. In the meantime, Kirsten focused on staying busy, taking care of her children, and honoring Jared's legacy by founding the Bryan Foundation. The foundation's main goal is to provide comfort for children in stressful situations, just like 2-year-old Bexley Bryan was on the night her father was murdered. To do this, the foundation provides Bexley boxes, filled with toys, books, blankets, and other items to police departments across the country. Officers generally give these boxes to children whose parents have been arrested or murdered, or when they are removed from abusive or unfit homes. By August 2023, it appeared that investigators and prosecutors had cracked the nefarious murder-for-hire plot. Join me as we explore Cortland, a city marked by stark contrasts. Here, the grim realities of gang violence and the illegal drug trade clash with the resilience of its native residents. Despite its small-town status, Cortland and the surrounding Pianola County, with a population of 34,000, experience significant criminal activity and dangerous gangs. Shootouts and arrests related to illegal activities are common, setting the stage for our story. On December the 6th, 2014, at 8:09 p.m., emergency services received a report of a vehicle fire on a rural road. The first firefighters on the scene were met with a blazing Kia and immediately began to extinguish the flames. Amid the black smoke, they noticed a dark figure slowly emerging from the nearby underbrush. It was a young woman, severely burned, looking like a living corpse. She was dressed only in her underwear, her skin melting and dripping, her body bleeding, and her hair reduced to a charred lump of ash. Despite her horrific injuries, she approached the firefighters and asked for help. The rescuers wrapped her blistered body in a blanket and laid her on the ground, staying by her side as they awaited the arrival of emergency medical services. The young woman, barely able to move her lips, tried to utter words that were mostly indiscernible. However, some responders managed to hear the names Eric or Derek when asked who had attacked her. She was airlifted to a hospital in Memphis, but tragically, after sustaining burns to 93% of her body, she passed away 4 hours later. The victim was 19-year-old local resident Jessica Lane Chambers. Jessica grew up in Cortland, living with her mother across the street from her grandmother, while her father and stepmother lived further down the street. Despite her petite and fragile appearance, she possessed a steely character. Raised in a tumultuous family environment, much like many of her friends, relatives, and neighbors, Jessica's father had pleaded guilty to manufacturing methamphetamine and had been arrested for driving under the influence in the early 2000s. In 2006, her 28-year-old neighbor was shot multiple times in his yard. Growing up in such a negative environment, Jessica didn't fit the mod of a quiet choir girl. She smoked, quarreled with her parents, had unstable relationships with boyfriends who had legal troubles, and sometimes acted out violently during disputes. Her behavior became more pronounced at 17, following the death of her older brother Alan in a car accident. In 2012, she moved out of her mother's home for several months after her mother disapproved of Jessica's new boyfriend. Her childhood was challenging, with her father spending some time in prison. However, by 2014, he had been released and was working as a mechanic at the local sheriff's department. Jessica was not afraid to occasionally break the law. This is a tragic story of a young woman whose life was marred by the harsh realities of her environment. Thank you for watching, and please stay tuned for more stories. She sold illegal substances and was affiliated with local gangs. Despite this, the sweet and smiling Jessica was respected and liked by almost everyone she knew, making the shocking manner of her demise all the more mysterious. Rumors of a burning car and a deliberate fire quickly spread throughout her small hometown. Jessica's father's position in the sheriff's department allowed him to be swiftly informed about the nearby car fire and the incident involving his daughter. Upon hearing the news, his wife ran down the street to tell Jessica's mother about the tragic event. They reached the hospital while Jessica was still alive. The tragic death of the young woman captured the nation's attention. Hundreds attended Jessica's funeral on December 13th, which was a memorial organized in honor of a joyful teenager, a former student cheerleader, and a girl who dreamed of rising above her circumstances. A prolonged investigation into this high-profile case soon followed, stirring public interest. The FBI, ATF, and U.S. Marshals were called in to assist with the local investigation. Initially, investigators theorized that the fire resulted from a car accident. However, this was quickly ruled out as no signs of emergency braking or other obstacles were found at the scene. An examination of the burnt vehicle also showed no signs of impact or damage to the body, thus disproving the accident theory. The primary theory then became arson, but at the time of the incident, the police had very few leads, and the lack of evidence prolonged the investigative process. Investigators questioned nearly everyone who might have been in contact with Jessica in the last days of her life. They even explored the possibility that her boyfriend, who was in prison at the time of the arson, might have ordered her demise. However, this theory was dismissed as he had been living in Iowa since their breakup. Ali Alai, the owner of a gas station and one of the last people to see Jessica alive, also came under suspicion. After giving his statement, he was released. There was a theory that Jessica had brought trouble upon herself by associating with one of the local gangs. However, the gang members denied their involvement and expressed their condolences to the Chambers family. Many of those called in for questioning had good reasons to lie, even if they didn't know who ended her life. It seemed the investigation was at a standstill, with neither a suspect nor a motive for such a brutal act. Public pressure on the investigation demanded justice, thereby slowing down the process and repeatedly providing false leads about Jessica's life. Several theories circulated on social media. For instance, locals accused Brian Rudd, Jessica's ex-boyfriend from high school, who might have acted out of jealousy in a moment of intense emotion. Others suggested that Jessica sold someone faulty pills for several $100s, which could have angered a dealer. "This is the most mysterious case I have ever worked on," said District Attorney John Champion, who had been serving in the county for 22 years. He had been working on Jessica's case since December, together with local detectives, the MI, FBI, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, and the U.S. Marshal Service. According to Champion, they had interviewed and in some cases re-interviewed over 130 people, including several individuals named Eric and Derek, yet authorities had not arrested any suspects so far. After some time, investigators managed to reconstruct the last week of Jessica's life, minute by minute, up to her tragic end. On December 5, 2014, after receiving a call on her cell phone, Jessica drove to the M&M Mini-Mart following a call from a friend. She purchased $14 worth of gasoline and left in her car at 5:15 p.m. Around 5:45 p.m., she called her mother to say she would return in a little while. Her hair was pulled back in a bun, and she was dressed in camouflage Panama pants. She then made a few more stops, one at an unknown house and another in the nearest town, before arriving at the scene of her tragic end, possibly already accompanied in her car by the person who would end her life. Surveillance cameras captured a man in a striped shirt, refueling a gas can before heading in the same direction as Jessica. However, there were no confirming data about the man's further movements. Cell phone records indicated that she spent about 10 to 15 minutes near a traffic light on Highway 6 heading towards Batesville. The subsequent 62 minutes between 6:30 p.m. and 7:32 p.m., also known as the mystery hour, took time to unravel. At 7:30 p.m., Jessica's phone showed that she reached the location on Heron Road where her burning car was later found. So, where did Jessica Chambers go, and what led to her brutal fate? The investigation moved very slowly. Only in December 2015, in a separate case involving charges of illegal possession of weapons, controlled substances, and counterfeits, 17 suspected gang members were arrested. District Attorney John Champion did not expect any of the gang members to be directly linked to the case of the burning incident. It turned out that during plea negotiations, all gang members were offered the opportunity to assist the investigation. Thus, they pointed to a certain Quentin Tells. Investigators finally learned who Jessica was within an hour before the fire. However, in February 2016, authorities announced a pause in the case to conduct a more detailed investigation and establish a motive. The lack of official suspects only deepened the spread of baseless rumors, which circulated on the internet and throughout the town. This situation attracted online detectives, leading to the creation of a Facebook page called Justice for Jessica, offering a $50,000 reward for information leading to an arrest. Rumors also circulated online that Jessica, who had previously dated African-American men, had been targeted by white supremacists for her involvement in interracial relationships. Conversely, online conspiracy theorists suggested that the culprits were African-American, alleging that Jessica's involvement with a gang led to her death as retaliation for trying to leave it. However, none of these theories received official confirmation. The investigation became particularly focused on Quinton Tells. Revisiting social media and Jessica's cell phone records helped identify who she had been communicating with in the last hours of her life. During the first interrogation, 29-year-old Quinton Tells recounted that the meeting, arranged by text message, was the only time they met, and he did not know her well, merely asking for a ride home. However, with more comprehensive information and presenting all the messages, Tells was arrested on charges of ending Jessica Chambers' life through arson. Text messages revealed that Tells repeatedly sent Jessica requests of a very intimate nature. On the day of the tragedy, Jessica texted Quinton at 9:02 a.m. to tell him she had just woken up, and he replied a few minutes later that he had as well. At 10:09 a.m., Tells texted Chambers, "I'm ready." Shortly after, she stopped at the M&M gas station, and she was captured on surveillance footage leaving a few minutes later, presumably to pick up Tells. They picked up one of Jessica's friends around 10:49 a.m., and Jessica dropped Quinton off later. Around 2:03 p.m., Tells began messaging Jessica again, explicitly asking for intimacy. This was the fourth message in 4 days in which he requested intimacy via text. Other deleted texts were recovered, including messages like "I'm excited" and "Come lie with me," which Jessica left unanswered. The passenger seat in Jessica Chambers' burned car was pushed back, a position typical for intimate activities in a car. Prosecutors argued that this was evidence that the two were engaged in, or at least attempting intimacy that tragic evening. On February 24th, Tells was charged with Jessica's murder and arson. It took the investigation considerable time to build the case. The first trial in the Jessica Chambers case began in 2017 in Batesville, Mississippi, about 50 miles south of Memphis. The trial was highly publicized with strict security measures in place. Jurors were sequestered, and spectators were screened with metal detectors before entering the courtroom. Prosecutor John Champion warned the jurors that they would see disturbing images of the burned Jessica Chambers and hear testimony from about 35 witnesses. Investigators stated that Jessica met Quinton Tells around Thanksgiving in November 2014. He was 7 years her senior and had attended the same high school before she enrolled there. In October of that same year, he had been released from prison, where he had served time for burglary. FBI agent Dustin Blunt testified during the first trial that Tells met Jessica through a friend at a gas station in Cortland, Mississippi. They spent a lot of time driving around together, and on multiple occasions, they had been intimate. He stated that they had been in the passenger seat, detailing that the passenger seat was reclined back, and he was sitting with Jessica on him. In court, John Champion said there was a series of text messages between them even on the day of her demise in which Tells requested intimacy. The front seat in the burned car was adjusted downward, as Tells had described during their previous encounter. Champion claimed that Tells attempted to strangle Jessica. Then, thinking she was deceased, doused her with gasoline and set her alight. A friend of Jessica who testified indicated that the three of them had ridden in Jessica's car the day before the incident. Later, Tells confessed to investigators that he saw Jessica that night and they went to a fast food restaurant together. Various friends he claimed to have been with when the fire started could not confirm his alibi. He then appeared on a store surveillance camera several miles away, where he was purchasing a phone card for a friend who lived in Louisiana. Tells did not testify in his own defense at the trial. A central element of the defense was the fact that several emergency responders at the scene of the tragedy reported hearing Jessica utter the name Eric or Derek. Ultimately, 2 jurors reacted to the fact that Quinton Tell's name sounded nothing like Eric or Derek. The case remains one of the most mysterious and tragic events to have occurred in Pianola County, highlighting the complex interplay of personal relationships, community dynamics, and the often challenging path to justice. John Champion pointed to text messages in which Tells repeatedly requested intimacy from Chambers. You will see text messages between them where Quinton is consistently asking Jessica for intimacy and she is consistently denying him, Champion testified at the first trial. It was proven that there was a series of text messages even on the day of her death where he was requesting intimacy from her. FBI agent Dustin Blunt shared that. During questioning, Tells admitted to deleting Jessica's contact information and all their text messages from his phone soon after her demise. When asked why, Quinton calmly responded, "I wasn't scared, but once we found out who it was who had passed, I just deleted my contact with her because I didn't want to have a deceased person in my phone, a number in my phone that just wouldn't be used anymore." At the first trial, FBI agent Dustin Blunt demonstrated that Tells and Chambers met through a friend at a gas station in their small hometown of Cortland. "They drove around together a lot, many times," said Agent Blunt, who recalled interrogating Tells. He went so far as to say that they had been intimate at some point. Agent Blunt, who spoke with Tells at his home 11 days after Jessica's passing, asked Tells to describe the intimate encounter and pinpoint where it occurred. Tells indicated a driveway south of the house he shared with his mother. Back in December 2014, he lived with his mother in a trailer up the road from the convenience store where Jessica Chambers was last seen before the fire. Tells' DNA was found on the woman's keys, and his cell phone records placed him at the location on the night in question. However, Quinton Tells continued to maintain his innocence. Defense attorney Darla Palmer, in her opening statement, urged the jurors to disregard the cell phone location evidence, which she argued could not prove that Tells and Chambers were at the same place. Tells has always maintained his innocence, telling police in the interrogation room, even after being threatened with capital punishment if it went to trial, "I've told the truth. I did not end Jessica's life. I don't have it in my heart to end anyone's life." His family claims that the police are merely looking for someone to blame in a case that has become a highly charged racial issue since Tells, who is African American, was arrested for the death of the attractive white cheerleader. Investigators looked for connections to other recent fires in Mississippi, Louisiana, and Alabama. Jessica was a white woman who dated African American men, and she wasn't the first white woman attacked over interracial relationships. However, they found no links. "I can't tell you how many different theories we've considered," said Champion. "Typically, law enforcement can quickly identify suspects in a homicide through street informants and interviewing witnesses, but no matter how much we've cooperated with people, listening to testimony, taking DNA swabs, conducting polygraph tests, we haven't come any closer to an arrest. The first trial in 2017 ended in a mistrial due to confusion related to the jury instructions. They stated that a guilty verdict must be unanimous, but did not explicitly say the same for a not guilty verdict." Officials noted that the jurors apparently decided that since they could not unanimously agree on Tells' guilt, this implied his innocence. By the time of the retrial in 2018, Quinton Tells was under investigation in Louisiana for the murder of student Ming Chen Fuchsia, as well as for the illegal use of a stolen bank card. In May 2019, he was charged with second-degree murder in connection with Fuchsia's death. The second trial was notably challenging. Jurors were shown a photo of Jessica Chambers, which firefighter Cole had taken upon arriving at the scene. Cole shared that the image of Chambers, her lips blackened with soot, haunted her, and she told jurors, "I see this photo I took every morning and every night." A veteran firefighter stated that he had never seen a victim with such severe burns when he found the young woman lying on the ground, barely able to speak after she had been deliberately set on fire. She was sitting on a blanket. Her hair was singed, soot around her nose and mouth, blisters all over her body. Cole, the Pianola County Director of Emergency Operations, told the jurors, "I sat and held her hand. That's all I could do," said firefighter Cole Haley, holding back tears. "I told her, 'Sweetheart, it's going to be okay,' and she replied, 'I am going to die.' At that moment, I lay down beside her, Haley recounted. Her skin was hanging from her lips and her nose, testified paramedic Bradley Dixon. Her eyelashes and eyebrows were gone. The hair on her head was a warm, matted clump. Testimonies at the second hearing also included a woman named Sherry Flowers, who had not appeared at the first trial of Tells. Sherry Flowers told investigators during questioning that she had picked up a hitchhiker on the night Jessica Chambers was tragically killed. In court, Flowers did not recognize Tells and agreed with the prosecutor that she did not know whom she had picked up. However, she testified that a man flagged her down, and she stopped because she thought it was her cousin. She agreed to give a ride to the man, whom she described as an African-American male about 20 years old and of slim to medium build. Tells, who was 5'9" tall, was 26 at the time. Initially, Flowers did not reach out to investigators. When asked why in court, she said, "I couldn't remember and thought it wasn't relevant to the case." Nevertheless, the prosecutors attempted to link this ride to the death of Jessica Chambers, suggesting it provided Quentin Tells with the opportunity to leave Jessica's car in order to return and set it on fire. However, the defense contested the timing, and Flowers admitted she was unsure of the exact time of the ride, only stating, "I know I picked someone up." Investigators also presented that Jessica Chambers' keys were found in a ditch 2 days after her death near the spot where the hitchhiker was picked up. The defense objected to the keys being admitted into evidence, arguing it was impossible to prove where the keys had been at the time. During the retrial, jurors were required to visit the sites involved in the crime and hear additional testimony. The second trial was highly emotional. Witnesses broke down on the stand, and spectators wept as photos of the young woman, Jessica Chambers' burned abdomen and face were shown. One of the first responder tearfully testifying embraced the girl's father as he stepped down from the stand. In 2018, the second jury also failed to reach a verdict in the Tells trial, marking the second jury in 2 years to be deadlocked over whether Quentin Tells was responsible for setting Jessica and her car on fire. Despite the suspect having been tried twice, no conviction was secured, and the case remains officially unsolved. Nevertheless, online sleuths continue to scour social media for any clues that investigators might have missed, developing their own often outlandish theories about who truly killed Jessica Chambers. The death of Jessica Chambers initially drew significant media attention. Over time, as media interest waned, the story captured the attention of internet detectives worldwide. To this day, one of the most discussed aspects of the Jessica Chambers case is what transpired between her leaving home and her tragic end. According to reports, Jessica left her house at 5:05 p.m. on the night of the crime, telling her mother she was going to a nearby gas station. Surveillance footage from the gas station shows Chambers there twice. The footage captures Jessica furling up, then heading toward the store and waving to someone off camera before approaching them. Observers continue to speculate about whom young Jessica was waving at that day. Amateur detectives have tried to crack the case on their own, developing their own theories and sometimes following information that was blatantly false. At times, they have even harassed the family and friends of Jessica Chambers. These individuals, ranging from conservative bloggers to gluten-free bakers from Montreal, boating enthusiasts from Florida, and grocery coupon collectors from North Carolina, claim to seek justice for Jessica above all else. Instead, they have terrorized her once peaceful hometown with their relentless demands for answers to their dubious theories. In the process, they spread rumor that seep into real life, stirring racial tensions, digging up old grudges, and reigniting feuds. For these amateur detectives, Jessica's death is not a mother's tragedy. It's a pastime. Media critics use the term missing white woman syndrome to describe the national obsession with victims who are young, blonde, and white. And Jessica fit all these criteria, a former cheerleader with flaxen hair weighing just 90 pounds. But those obsessed with Jessica's death are particularly fixated on her tiny hometown. Outsiders can easily track down social media accounts and even phone numbers of Jessica's family members, friends, ex-boyfriends, and sworn enemies, all of whom have reported being contacted by strangers wanting to interrogate them about whether they took the life of the teenager. The police say they still don't know who ended her life and why, leaving the mystery in the hands of online amateur sleuths who may do more harm than good. When does a personal tragedy become a public spectacle? The Justice for Jessica memorial page on Facebook, managed by Jessica's older stepsister, remains popular. It has united many compassionate people from around the world who, once hearing about the young woman burned alive, send letters of sympathy, supportive words for the family and friends, and donate books and gifts in Jessica's name. Hanging in Jessica's room is a memorial quilt made of bright pink patches with zebra prints along with her photo and the dates of her birth and death. The words "secret group" were stitched into the top left square. No one knows what this phrase means, as the quilt, like other gifts, came from around the world. Tragically, Jessica's death did not change the town of Cortland. Everyone knows each other here, and both authorities and locals believe the attack was personal. 29-year-old Quinton Tellis, serving time for a different crime, is not a free man, yet justice for Jessica still has not been achieved. Regrettably, Jessica's mother, Lisa, passed away on October 29, 2021, at the age of 52 without seeing justice served for her daughter. It remains uncertain whether there will be a third trial for the case of the young woman burned alive.
Today we're going to explore a tragic case set in the vast expanse of the Aegean Sea, where the horizon seems endless and the water stretches up to meet the sky. On this particular journey, the Royal Caribbean cruise ship was sailing with newlyweds George Smith and Jennifer, who stood on the deck, feeling the wind in their hair and marveling at the majestic nature around them. The Aegean Sea lay before them, promising a future full of dreams and plans. What began as their wedding journey turned into a mystery that would captivate many. On July 5, 2005, around 8 a.m., on Deck 7 of the Royal Caribbean cruise ship, 16-year-old Emily Rausch from Chicago was getting ready for a sunny day. Looking out of her cabin window, Emily noticed something alarming. Blood smeared across the canopy that shielded a nearby lifeboat, with a stain near the edge as if someone had fallen overboard. Alarmed, Emily reported this to the ship's staff. Other passengers also noticed these frightening signs, sparking a lively and anxious discussion about what might have happened. This incident quickly made headlines in international publications. Just days after a joyful young couple began their honeymoon cruise, their happiness was shattered by a horrific, unexplained event. The mystery unfolded in cabin number 962, with theories ranging from an accident to robbery or even premeditated murder. The investigation turned into a complex puzzle for the authorities, with evidence pointing to multiple suspects, each hiding their own secrets. It seemed that many on board knew more than they were willing to reveal. What truly happened on that dark night aboard the ship remains a question for detectives, journalists, and everyone following this enigmatic case. George Smith was known for his cheerful, inquisitive, and bright personality. Born in Greenwich, Connecticut, he had a happy childhood filled with family joy and support. His father, George Smith Sr., owned and ran a liquor store, a family business that George Jr. was passionate about. After completing his business education at Babson College in Massachusetts in 2000, George worked in Boston as a computer data mining analyst. However, his heart was always with the family business, and he eventually returned home to help run the store, preparing to take it over and allow his parents to retire. As we delve deeper into this case, we'll explore the events that led to the tragic turn of their honeymoon and the intricate web of secrets and lies aboard the Royal Caribbean. In 2002, during a reunion with friends, George Smith met Jennifer, who would become his life partner. Jennifer, also from Connecticut, had just secured a job as an elementary school teacher. She was bright, beautiful, and ambitious, much like George. The two quickly fell in love, and George's parents were delighted with his choice. 3 years later, in 2005, when George was 26, the couple decided to marry and start a new chapter in their lives. They celebrated their wedding at the Castle Hill Inn in the picturesque town of Newport, Rhode Island. The ceremony took place oceanfront, providing a perfect backdrop for such an important event. Immediately after the ceremony, the newlyweds embarked on a wedding trip, choosing a cruise on a luxury liner, one of the majestic ships of the Royal Caribbean. The 12-day tour involved sailing the beautiful waters of the Aegean Sea. Their journey began in Barcelona on June 29th, with stops along France's Côte d'Azur and the coast of Italy. Aboard the liner, George and Jennifer quickly befriended another couple and a young man named Josh Askin from California. Josh, a 20-year-old with a keen sense of humor, soon became close friends with George, and the group enjoyed spending time together. On July 1st, while the liner was moored off the Italian coast, they decided to go ashore together and have fun. They spent July 4th exploring the island, walking through the narrow streets of its old town, swimming in the pristine Aegean Sea, and savoring local cuisine in cozy taverns. Happy and cheerful, they enjoyed each other's company and the beautiful atmosphere of Mykonos, leaving unforgettable memories in their hearts. They planned to continue the evening together on the deck of the liner. After a romantic dinner, George and Jennifer met up with their friends again. The merry company decided to have a good laugh and remember this exotic corner of the world. The evening was full of laughter and excitement. After enjoying appetizers and drinks, the newlyweds, along with Josh, went to the casino on board. George and Josh enjoyed sitting at the craps table, while Jennifer played poker. By the end of the evening, the newlyweds had lost a significant amount of money, but joked about it, as it was their honeymoon. After the casino closed, the friends decided to continue their night out. The last video of George was recorded around 2:30 a.m. on one of the liner's security cameras, showing him leaving the casino. However, this did not mean George would return to his cabin. In the early morning hours of July 5, 2005, a mysterious plot began to unfold on the Greek island of Mykonos. George Smith, 26, a newlywed on an Aegean cruise with his wife Jennifer, disappeared. George was reportedly enjoying the liner's atmosphere of fun and luxury. Everything seemed harmless that night, but the sequel turned out to be much darker. The captain of the ship examined the cabin where strange footprints had been found, as well as the place on deck. No one was in the cabin, and the footprints and evidence indicated something serious had happened. The news of the possible disappearance quickly spread among the passengers, causing alarm. Deck 7 was cordoned off, and no one was allowed in or out of their cabins. The ship's crew thoroughly checked every possible area on the liner, hoping to find George and Jennifer. After discovering blood, the newlyweds were presumed to have mysteriously disappeared. The senior officer took charge and headed to their stateroom to investigate. From the available traces, it was hypothesized that George might have fallen overboard. Meanwhile, the search for the young couple continued on the other side of the ship. By 10 a.m., Jennifer was found in the ship's spa, having a pre-booked massage session. She expressed deep surprise and concern, claiming she was unaware of her husband's whereabouts and had not seen him since the previous night. Jennifer explained that when she woke up, George wasn't there, but she wasn't initially worried as he often spent time with friends. She went to her spa treatment without being bothered by his absence. At noon, Turkish authorities arrived on board to begin an investigation. The ship's captain reassured the passengers and announced that cooperation with local authorities was necessary to clarify the circumstances, expressing hope for a quick resolution. The police began their questioning with Jennifer, who, in her agitated state and apparent lack of information about her husband, became the main suspect. She said she hadn't seen George since the previous night, and that men in white uniforms from the Royal Caribbean had informed her that her husband might have fallen overboard. They had noticed traces of blood on the boat's awning, confirming something terrible had happened to George. Investigators scrutinized cabin 962, which was in disarray, possibly from a hurried search or struggle. They found small drops of blood on the carpet and towel in the bathroom, and fingerprints on the balcony railing. Turkish investigators also found 2 small bloodstains on the bedding, each about 2 centimeters long, adding to the mystery of George Smith's disappearance. These samples were identified as George's blood.
All evidence indicated that George had been traumatized inside the cabin before his mysterious disappearance. The investigators' attention was particularly drawn to a chair on the balcony, which had been moved to allow someone to sit next to the railing. They found marks on the railing, suggesting someone had sat on it. This raised suspicions among many, including the ship's captain, that George might have fallen from the balcony. However, the high railing and the presence of blood both on the boat's awning and inside the cabin also suggested a possible murder. Investigators began reconstructing the sequence of events from that night, trying to determine who George had been spending time with and what might have led to this tragedy. The investigation was just beginning, but it was already clear that they were facing a complex and dark story, full of mysteries and unexpected twists and turns. When the Turkish authorities boarded the ship to investigate George Smith's disappearance, they decided to start by questioning the group of young men with whom the newlyweds had spent time the previous night. The situation remained mysterious, and every detail could be crucial in solving the case. The captain of the ship examined the cabin where strange footprints had been found, as well as the place on deck. No one was in the cabin, and the footprints and evidence indicated something serious had happened. The news of the possible disappearance quickly spread among the passengers, causing alarm. Deck 7 was cordoned off, and no one was allowed in or out of their cabins. The ship's crew thoroughly checked every possible area on the liner, hoping to find George and Jennifer. After discovering blood, the newlyweds were presumed to have mysteriously disappeared. The senior officer took charge and headed to their stateroom to investigate. From the available traces, it was hypothesized that George might have fallen overboard. Meanwhile, the search for the young couple continued on the other side of the ship. By 10 a.m., Jennifer was found in the ship's spa, having a pre-booked massage session. She expressed deep surprise and concern, claiming she was unaware of her husband's whereabouts and had not seen him since the previous night. Jennifer explained that when she woke up, George wasn't there, but she wasn't initially worried, as he often spent time with friends. She went to her spa treatment without being bothered by his absence. At noon, Turkish authorities arrived on board to begin an investigation. The ship's captain reassured the passengers and announced that cooperation with local authorities was necessary to clarify the circumstances, expressing hope for a quick resolution. The police began their questioning with Jennifer, who, in her agitated state and apparent lack of information about her husband, became the main suspect. She said she hadn't seen George since the previous night, and that men in white uniforms from the Royal Caribbean had informed her that her husband might have fallen overboard. They had noticed traces of blood on the boat's awning, confirming something terrible had happened to George. Investigators scrutinized cabin 962, which was in disarray, possibly from a hurried search or struggle. They found small drops of blood on the carpet and towel in the bathroom and fingerprints on the balcony railing. Turkish investigators also found 2 small bloodstains on the bedding, each about 2 centimeters long, adding to the mystery of George Smith's disappearance. These samples were identified as George's blood. All evidence indicated that George had been traumatized inside the cabin before his mysterious disappearance. The investigators' attention was particularly drawn to a chair on the balcony, which had been moved to allow someone to sit next to the railing. They found marks on the railing, suggesting someone had sat on it. This raised suspicions among many, including the ship's captain, that George might have fallen from the balcony. However, the high railing and the presence of blood both on the boat's awning and inside the cabin also suggested a possible murder. Investigators began reconstructing the sequence of events from that night, trying to determine who George had been spending time with and what might have led to this tragedy. The investigation was just beginning, but it was already clear that they were facing a complex and dark story full of mysteries and unexpected twists and turns. When the Turkish authorities boarded the ship to investigate George Smith's disappearance, they decided to start by questioning the group of young men with whom the newlyweds had spent time the previous night. The situation remained mysterious, and every detail could be crucial in solving the case. Members of the group revealed that George and Jennifer had consumed too much alcohol that night. According to them, George was intoxicated, and they helped him back to his cabin removed his shoes, and left him alone. They also reported that they could not find Jennifer and assumed she had returned to the cabin later. However, there were discrepancies in Josh Askin's testimony. He claimed that he saw Jennifer leave with a casino employee named Lloyd. Josh believed there was a passionate connection between Jennifer and Lloyd, and they didn't hide their feelings even in George's presence. However, video footage showed that at 3:30 a.m., Jennifer stumbled away, leaving George with her new friends, and Lloyd's keycard data indicated that he returned to his cabin at 3:25 a.m., which was confirmed by his girlfriend, whom he woke upon entering the cabin. These discrepancies raised further questions for investigators and led them to suspect that Josh Askin might have had his own motives for hiding important details. The investigation continued, and each new detail added more mystery to the story. Greg Rosenberg, a 19-year-old, was enjoying the cruise with his family and friends, including his cousin Zach Rosenberg and close friend Rostislav Kaufman. All three, despite their Russian roots, held American passports and lived in New York City. The fun began in the casino, where Jennifer and Greg decided to try their luck at poker. The mutual gambling lasted late into the night, and when the casino closed at 2:30 a.m., the group decided to continue their fun. They headed to the disco, continuing to dance and drink. Lloyd Botha, the casino manager, was also spotted in their company, joining in the fun. However, the events of the night began to diverge according to witness accounts. As the night progressed, the group members gradually dispersed to their cabins. The boys were visibly drunk and rowdy. According to the ship's rules, the staff decided to stop serving them due to their loud and inappropriate behavior. The young men remembered they had a bottle of absinthe purchased during their walk on Mykonos. Despite the rules forbidding passengers from drinking their own alcohol, Josh returned to his cabin to retrieve the absinthe, which had an unusually high alcohol concentration of over 70%, making it one of the strongest drinks available. George decided to help his friend by hiding the bottle behind the waistband of his shorts. After 3 a.m., when the ship was already quiet, an observant janitor noticed the group of young men, including Greg, Zach, Rostislav, Josh, and George, drinking the absinthe. This circumstance did not go unnoticed and became another element in the investigation. It wasn't just the guys who were drunk that evening. Jennifer, who had seemed relatively sober and calm earlier, began to change noticeably. She started staggering and at one point even leaned on the casino manager, Lloyd. Witnesses had different impressions of her behavior. Some thought she was trying to keep her balance, while others saw it as flirting. What happened next between the young spouses remains unclear. According to witnesses, there was a conflict between George and Jennifer. They might have been discussing the evening's events, either jokingly or seriously, adding another layer of complexity to the investigation. At some point, Jennifer hit George. It was unclear whether this happened playfully or in anger. After that, Jennifer left the disco at about 3:30 a.m., visibly intoxicated and stumbling. She left George with his new friends, marking a turning point in the night's events. Staff witnesses' testimonies proved pivotal in uncovering the details of the incident. A janitor who had earlier noticed the young men enjoying absinthe saw Jennifer staggering down the hallway. He supported her, helped her to the elevator, and watched her turn right when she reached her deck. However, her stateroom was on the left, yet she headed in the opposite direction. Jennifer was later found sleeping in the hallway, far from her room. 2 guards and a female duty officer used a wheelchair to get her back to her quarters at 4:52 a.m., but George wasn't there. The balcony door's curtains were drawn tightly and remained stationary despite the breeze. This raised questions about whether George could have gone out to the balcony on his own after being left in bed. Deputy Chief of Police Chit Hyman and his wife, in a neighboring cabin, witnessed the events. At 4 a.m., they were awakened by loud noises from stateroom 9062, where the newlyweds were staying. Chit Hyman called guest services to report the noise and pounded on the wall, resulting in brief silence. However, the loud talking resumed for about 3 minutes, followed by a loud argument on the balcony. The Hyman couple heard someone say "good night" several times, as if trying to chase people out of the cabin. This was followed by sounds of moving furniture and a loud thud like an object falling. Chit Hyman opened the door and saw 3 unidentified men. Several passengers also reported hearing a loud noise that sounded like a body hitting the canopy of the boat, followed by a woman's scream, but there was no conclusive evidence that a woman was in the cabin at the time. According to witnesses, 4 young men entered the cabin, but only 3 were seen leaving. The question arose whether one stayed behind to search for money from the newlyweds, possibly aiming to steal after their generous casino game. The theory of a failed robbery attempt seemed plausible. However, there were alibis for the 3 boys, Greg, Zach, and Rostislav, who were reportedly in another stateroom just minutes after Chit Hyman saw the 3 unknown men. The key card records for George's stateroom confirmed that the boys entered at 4:05 a.m., but there was no record of them re-entering. Thus, several theories emerged regarding what may have happened to George Smith. The theory of a possible robbery is a leading one. George and Jennifer seemed more or less sober when they left the casino at 2:30 a.m., but by 3:30 a.m., they were unable to return to their cabin on their own, suggesting possible exposure to illegal substances. Witnesses mentioned that George and Jennifer spoke openly about having large sums of money, possibly from wedding gifts or casino winnings, estimated in the tens of thousands of dollars. George wore an expensive Breitling watch, and Jennifer had an expensive engagement ring, indicating their wealth. Their quarters may have been searched for money, and the blood on the sheets could have resulted from an attempt to remove George's valuable watch. The second theory relates to the effects of alcohol and possible hallucinogens. The captain, learning of the passengers' drunkenness and the footprints on the balcony, concluded that there might have been an unintentional accident, with George falling overboard during a scuffle. Experts in toxicology emphasize that the concentration of the active substance in absinthe, particularly throne, is regulated by European Union laws, making it unlikely to cause hallucinations. However, the absinthe consumed by the group had a high alcohol concentration of over 70%, making it one of the strongest drinks available, possibly contributing to impaired judgment and accidental behavior. In conclusion, the investigation into George Smith's disappearance remains complex and shrouded in mystery, with multiple theories and conflicting testimonies adding to the enigma. Illegally made absinthe with a much higher concentration can be found on the black market, which in theory can cause hallucinations. However, this seems unlikely in this case, as the absinthe the Smith couple purchased was bought officially in Europe and could not have caused such effects. According to experts, to achieve hallucinogenic effects using official absinthe would require consuming a huge quantity, so large that it would be intolerable for the body and would most likely lead to fatal alcohol intoxication. Thus, the version about the influence of alcohol and hallucinogens in this case seems unlikely and lacks convincing evidence. Interviewing suspected company members in George Smith's disappearance was an important part of the investigation. FBI agents conducted polygraph interviews with several key individuals, including Jennifer and casino manager Lloyd Botha. Both passed the polygraph successfully. However, Josh Askin failed the polygraph interview, indicating he might have had secrets regarding George's disappearance. It is also possible that special interrogation tactics affected the result. A videotape of 3 guys, including Russians, joking about what had happened proved to be important evidence. One unidentified guy on the tape said, "We gave him a lesson in paragliding without a parachute," hinting at some incident involving George. In 2009, Greg, Zach, Rostislav, and Josh Askin were interviewed by FBI agents as witnesses in the investigation into George Smith's mysterious death. Zach Rosenberg and Josh Askin refused to give direct answers and invoked the Fifth Amendment, which allows them not to testify against themselves. Their ambiguous testimonies suggested they were unwilling or unable to provide a full account of what happened. Greg Rosenberg, who was among the young men entertaining that night, claimed they ordered food to their cabin, serving as an alibi for the Russian boys. However, ship records do not support this claim, and the delivery service had been blocked for their cabin the previous day. Greg couldn't say who placed the orders. Witnesses gave different accounts of George and Jennifer's relationship. Greg emphasized that everyone was highly intoxicated, making it hard to determine the nature of their relationship. Josh Askin said Greg left the cabin after ordering food, which Greg denied. These contradictions complicated the investigation, requiring further verification. Greg stated he had no information about Jennifer or Lloyd Botha's involvement in George's disappearance, but insisted the event was not accidental. He claimed something crazy happened that night, which would eventually be revealed. In December 2019, Greg Rosenberg was murdered, and his death remains unsolved. Police are investigating a possible link between his murder and George Smith's death. George Smith's mysterious disappearance cast a shadow over his family. The situation became increasingly complicated, and the family's behavior attracted public and law enforcement attention. The Smith family pressed authorities for the truth and justice. The case was transferred from the FBI's Connecticut office to the New York office. Their persistence and media attention yielded little result. The family offered a $100,000 reward for information and called for a boycott of the cruise company, which they believed was covering up the incident to protect profits. The relationship between George's parents and Jennifer deteriorated after the incident. Publicly, Jennifer seemed too collected, and her reticence raised suspicion. She claimed to follow FBI instructions, but the Smith family lost faith in her when she accepted a $1 million settlement offer from the cruise company, which they saw as a betrayal. They felt Jennifer was too quick to accept the offer and was hiding something. Jennifer claimed she remembered almost nothing from that night after 2:30 a.m. and was unaware the liner staff had found her in the corridor and returned her to her cabin. The Turkish investigation did not satisfy the Smith family, and skeptical of the official findings, they decided to seek justice independently. They enlisted independent forensic scientist Henry Lee, who conducted studies in the cabin and on the balcony, work not included in the official investigation. These investigations revealed key information about what had happened and could confirm one of the two main versions of events: murder or accident. According to Henry Lee, the height of the balcony makes a fall from it questionable. It could have been the result of a third party pushing George, or in some insane state, he might have climbed up on the chair himself and fallen. Nevertheless, the latter version raised many questions and doubts. The expert intended to conduct an experiment to simulate a fall from the balcony, but the company owning the liner refused this request. George's relatives claimed that this decision was made to hinder their attempts to establish the truth. Henry Lee also conducted investigations in the cabin, on the balcony, and on the boat, but the results of these investigations remained unavailable to the public. Meanwhile, the FBI stepped in and began their own investigation, though many of their findings and discoveries also remained secret. The FBI focused on the 4 young men who spent the night with George, Josh Askin, and the 3 Russians, Greg, Zach Rosenberg, and Rostislav Kaufman.